Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Outlook and discussion from May the 31st, 2016. A lot to cover today, so let's jump right in. First stop on the tour, the sea surface temperature anomalies for today, roughly. Came out yesterday, actually, the 30th. The NOAA-NESDIS map updates every Monday and Thursday. And as you can see, the growing, soon-to-be La Nina. It's not La Nina yet, but we do have this coldness coming into the equatorial Pacific. I think this is interesting, all this cool water in and around the, we'll call it the northern part of the southeast Pacific. Still pretty warm in the southeast Pacific per se. I can outline that separately here for you. But elsewhere, kind of cooling off a bit, as you can tell. And then the main development region out here in the open Atlantic, tropical Atlantic as it were, still very much on the warm side, as this remains very much on the cold side. Will be interesting to see what Dr. Phil Klotzbach says. He's the lead author on the Colorado State University Tropical Meteorology Project's Hurricane Outlook that they do, the seasonal outlook. That'll be updated tomorrow. We're not at an El Nino. This is what it looked like this time last year. Just to kind of juxtapose two opposing years, he couldn't have much more of a polar opposite than that. Here it is roughly today, and roughly this same time last year. Very cold look to the tropical Atlantic at that point, and a very, very warm and growing El Nino. Very warm in the rest of the southeast Pacific there. Just a totally different ball game. Now, the evolution of the La Nina is as such. Very large area of cold subsurface water with only one small little island of warmth left out there at about 180 degrees longitude, or roughly the date line, way out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Cold water anomalies making it to the surface, getting ready to pop to the surface here, even way out in the western Pacific, and the La Nina should be coming on by the time we get to the fall, and that should have pretty big implications on the Atlantic hurricane season. Basically, it reduces the amount of wind shear in the deep tropics, so we'll see if that happens. Actual sea surface temperatures, the entire Gulf of Mexico, I can't find any place that is below 26 degrees Celsius, so everything in the Gulf is on the right-hand side of this scale now. In fact, some of these water temperatures here and in parts of the Florida Bay area, 29 degrees Celsius, knocking on the door of 30 C, which is very warm, almost 88 degrees. So most of the Gulf in the low to mid 80s. No surprise there. We go back to this map. I'll show you a good chunk of the Gulf of Mexico running a little bit above normal. Nothing alarming, though. It's always going to be warm enough to sustain, unfortunately, catastrophic hurricanes. It's just a matter of the other ingredients coming into place. The Gulf Stream doing its thing, nice and warm. Water temperatures above the 80-degree mark all the way out here in the area that I have outlined, and then spreading north from south to north across the rest of the Atlantic, even along the shelf waters of the Carolinas here where Bonnie was interacting over the last few days. Water temperatures in the mid to upper 70s in most cases. So things are moving right along. Now, this time of year, hurricane season beginning tomorrow officially in the Atlantic Basin. The area in blue would be the typical climatologically favored area. Kind of looks like the outline of a dinosaur, maybe. Maybe my imagination's getting away with me. But these are the typical tracks that we see this time of year. Climatology favors this area, not so much this area, just because of how the upper level winds are. We need to see the westerlies that typically streak across like this, and I'm just kind of drawing in here, don't take this verbatim. These need to be lifting much more to the north so that the deep tropics becomes much more shear free. The change of wind direction with height in the atmosphere, and that doesn't happen typically until later in the season. And as such, during the first 10 days of the hurricane season, officially June 1st through the 10th, these would be the development areas we've seen over the past 100+ years. They start to increase. You see there are none out here in the deep tropics, and we do have a cluster of them in the southeast Pacific, which is where we will head in just a moment. Offshore of the Cape Fear area, the leftovers of Bonnie. Let's see what that looks like on satellite. Doesn't look like much. A little bit of a weak low pressure area still sitting in here. hurricane hunters are scheduled to stay out and kind of investigate it, do some training, keeping their skills up. Not a bad idea as this kind of rides up and along the North Carolina coast. Water temperatures all through this region are marginal at best, so there's not a lot of energy for this to work with, but it could still create a few bands of heavier rain from time to time. Meanwhile, in the Southeast Pacific, invest Area 91E. Remember, they have the same general naming convention, if you want to call it that, for the Pacific that they do in the Atlantic. They assign a number 90 through 99 and then the letter E for East Pacific. In this case, for an area of disturbed weather, you have this large elongated area of low pressure. It looks like this will try to consolidate and eventually become more than likely a tropical storm and then a hurricane at some point. I'll show you some of the model plots for that in just a moment. Quick look at the radar in and around the North Carolina, South Carolina coastal regions. Not much organization to the remnants of Bonnie, but a few heavier showers inland, so be mindful of that if you are out and about over the next few hours. And this mess will slowly move its way up along the coast. It's going to take a few more days for this to clear the pattern. Now, out in the Eastern Pacific, back to Eastern Pacific 91, as they call it, EP. We just call it 91E for short. Most of the computer model guidance, as you can clearly see, generally favoring a westward track. Mexico would be like way over here, so it's going to go away from Mexico. Some of the guidance suggesting, let's go back. All of the guidance suggests an upward trend. Some of the guidance suggesting it becomes a hurricane. Even the intensity consensus here, moderate tropical storm. It won't surprise me looking at the large size of that envelope of energy that if it can consolidate, that it would become a hurricane. And I believe the first one, the name in the Pacific, is Agatha. So if it does get named, it'll be Agatha. All right? So there you have it. All right, so tomorrow begins the Atlantic hurricane season officially. We've already gone through Alex and Bonnie. Name-wise, that doesn't really matter in terms of the rest of the season. None of those formed in the deep tropics from a tropical wave and things of that nature, so I wouldn't look at that as a harbinger of things to come necessarily. And it's really the meat of the season, August, September, and the first 2 to 3 weeks of October that we expect the highest amount of activity. So if in July, especially, we get development coming out of the deep tropics on a prolific scale, then we might think, oh, wow, this season's going to be a lot busier than we thought. Otherwise, I think it's just going to be an average season with 6 to 8 hurricanes total. Wouldn't surprise me at all. 2 to 4 of those, something like that, becoming Category 3 or higher. And we just have to be ready for that one that comes knocking on your door, right? That's what it's all about. I'll be covering that and much more throughout the rest of the season once it gets started. So look for a little bit longer blog post tomorrow on the site, and then an in-depth discussion video-wise on what we're going to do this hurricane season as we kick off the start to that tomorrow. All right? So that's it. Have a good rest of your Tuesday. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.